Climate change. We've never faced a greater threat. Yet all that we produce and consume inflates the debt of greenhouse gases we release. We feel them raise the temp, and the tempest we'll unleash will leave us weeping to forget. Unless we take collective action, make a pledge to finally change our ways and keep climate change in check. To benefit the planet and all of its inhabitants, we know it can be done, so listen up and join the quest.
And climate change demands that we change everything that we do.
Chad's Climate Quest is brought to you by Regenintel, activating humanity to become a planet-positive species. Find out more at www.regenintel.earth. On today's episode, we're welcoming Danijel Višević, a founding partner at the World Fund, Europe's largest climate tech VC. Danijel is a recognized tech thought leader and a top expert in public policy, communications, and brand building. His journey includes a significant stint at Project A, one of Europe's most successful venture capitalists, and an influential role shaping the media presence of former German Chancellor Angela Merkel. Additionally, as a founder and journalist, his focus on climate tech, startups, and venture capital has provided him with unique insights into the evolving landscape of sustainable technology and investment that help us move forward to a regenerative future. Hi, Danijel. It's great to have you on the show. And thank you for coming along my Climate Quest.
Hi, Chad. Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Danijel, I have to have a bit of a disclosure before we dive into this, and that's, I actually am a advisor to the World Fund. The World Fund is a client of Regenintel, and the World Fund is a founding board member of the Global Solutions Alliance. So we have a long relationship, Danijel. And even though that relationship has been so wonderful and fruitful over the years, I'm not going to take it easy on you this time.
I know.
Okay. All right. But to be honest, there's a reason for that relationship. And that's because, I'll be totally frank, you're one of the most, clearly to my mind, one of the most heartfelt, authentic leaders in the climate tech space, and particularly in the investment space. And I don't say that lightly. The only one, the other person that really comes to my mind, to be honest, is the other Danijel Valenzuela from the World Fund. You two are really creating a new space, I think, in the impact investment world with authenticity and integrity, and that's why you're on this show. And this is why I have such a long-standing relationship with you all. So thank you again for being on the show.
Thank you so much for those kind words.
Yeah. Well, what's special about you is you don't just look at how to, the typical sort of investment space, how to just invest in climate tech. You're thinking about the future. You're thinking about future-proofing our economy by addressing the climate crisis, but in a regenerative way. And that journey towards a regenerative future is really a unique pathway that everyone goes on. And Danijel, I'd like to really understand, what was your personal experiences that shaped your own climate quest to lead you to the work you are today at the World Fund?
So first of all, what shaped me was the moment when I understood what the climate crisis means. Of course, it's difficult to grasp, and I think maybe not a single person on this planet understands it fully, for sure. But when you understand what consequences it has, impacts billions of lives and not only humans, when you understand that potentially we will have a mega collapse in the near future, then you just can't stop doing what you have been doing before if you haven't been already in climate. So I was, as you explained, a journalist focusing on venture capital and startups, already then member of the Green Party in Germany, so quite aware of environmental harm. But only, I have to confess, with the movement of Fridays for Future in 2018, I fully grasped and digged deep into the science and the physics of the climate crisis, which then, make me take this quest and build World Fund. I hope that answers the question. I think there's so many answers, but just understanding climate crisis to a certain degree, I think if you get to that point, there's no back.
Mm-hmm. I love that you say that, because, I've often said that when you approach the climate crisis and you see what's happening in the world, and then get to the point of understanding the system of solutions that, when implemented the right way, like in a regenerative way, it's a total duh factor. And what I mean by that is you see the cascading benefits of all of these solutions when implemented again in the right way. And there are so many ahas that at some point it just becomes a duh, a no-brainer. You can't think about it in another way. And so there must have been a point where there was that aha moment, or a series of aha moments for you. And so what were those? Describe a little bit some of those aha moments. Not just the challenges we're facing, but the solutions that we're facing that drew you to embrace this, regenerative mindset. So going beyond just the typical climate or sustainability world, but moving beyond sustainability towards regeneration. Like, what were those some aha moments?
There are some aha moments. Let me mention 3. The first aha moment was when I still was a journalist and pretty much writing stories and discovering the power of narratives. Then, of course, you get the largest reach when you have stories that are emotional and where you just can tell something that sticks. And that's fantastic. And the first aha moment was when I realized that what sticks really, often it's emotions, but usually it's something what changes your life, or it should be. And so that first aha moment I had was that it's not relevant if people talk about you an hour later after the story, but if they talk about you and your story a year and 2 years later. That could only happen with, let's call it, regenerative stories. Never ever used that phrase before. So yeah, I see in the chat, power of narratives is key. It is, but you need to tell a story that is regenerative so that it cascades and so that it tips like many more points. Second aha moment was when I was serving Angela Merkel, and that was really a huge honor. I did that after, while I was journalist, I also started to support investors and politicians and founders with building their personal brand, with communicating, creating narratives. And of course, huge honor then when I was offered to do that for Angela Merkel. But there was one aha moment where I learned, okay, the huge shift that needs to happen, unfortunately, I think it won't come from politics. At least while I was serving the most powerful woman on earth, I learned that even though she's super aware of climate crisis, as a physicist with a PhD, understands far more than I do or ever did, she was not in the position to change anything. And so the aha moment was when I then, at that time still was working with entrepreneurs who built climate technologies that changed the lives of millions. And so it was technologies that helped to decarbonize, but, and this is what I love, that you are so much into regenerative world, not only decarbonization, but creating a regenerative world where we really have built a world where we live together. I know it sounds a bit poetic, like in harmony, where we just don't ruin or don't exploit the planet and the others around us, but understand that we are all one. Can't describe it better, but that's for me a huge part of regeneration. So when we invest with World Fund, so this is what I built then, this fortunately large European climate VC, to invest in those regenerative solutions. This was our vision and understanding that we need to support those entrepreneurs who build technologies that can be the foundation of such a world.
Well, I love these. These are 3 really key aha moments that brought you. That clearly shows that pathway. And they each of them seems like their own quest in some ways, right? They're different parts of your overall journey to get you where you are today, and to that regenerative mindset, which is, we're all on, right? There's not one quest that we're on. There's so many quests along our journeys. And I see these 3 key pillars and these aha moments that come. And I think that's such an important point to honor and recognize that it's not something we can just immediately turn on. It's something that we have to grow into to understand what this radical, and it is somewhat radical, systems change. Well, perhaps let me take that back. It seems radical, but in many ways it's going back to older systems that we know have operated for very well for the planet, but now going back to those seems like a radical shift in thinking. And, but we have to do this with a sense of, optimism, grounded optimism, because the challenges that we're facing in the climate crisis are real, right? It's built into the system. We can't avoid this. There's a sense of urgency that we have to address this. And that's where I think some challenges come, because we want to do this in the right way. We want to create this transition to a regenerative economy in the right way. And yet we're also faced with this urgency of climate change. And there's this silver bullet syndrome. How do we find the right companies, the right tech, the right things that are just going to solve everything as soon as we can because of the urgency? And that can run into some pitfalls because, as we know, there's no such thing as a silver bullet. But I want to get your take on this, like where you see this, tension between the urgency of dealing with climate change now, immediately, and the deep work that needs to be done when we talk about system change towards that, regenerative future that you've just described, where life in planetary and human well-being are the same.
I think that answer isn't even too difficult, because we have so many solutions, and that's the wonderful thing. Humankind is brilliant. We have so many brilliant minds that are bringing up those solutions that can help us decarbonize, but also help us to create that world that we envision. Listen, so maybe to disclose even more how we work together, Chad, right? With Regenerative Intel, you are reviewing our CPP assessments. So climate performance potential is a metric that we have developed at World Fund to quantify the emission savings potential of technologies. But that's not everything. And that's why we also need you. So you, with your background and your fellows that have founded Regenerative Intelligence, you have the data, you have the knowledge, you know the technologies, and you can help us to find out how huge the emission savings potential of a technology is. So when we invest, we always look at something that can save emissions significantly. And for us, it is per year, at least 100 megatons of CO2 emissions. But you have many technologies that can do that, but they are still connected to fossil fuels. For example, I just really want to make it as easy to grasp and visual as possible. So, for example, if you invest in a technology that helps you to get the carbon out of the oil and the gas that you get out of the earth, and so that you can burn kind of clean gas, you will maybe help to decarbonize. But is it the world that we are building that we envision? No. So there are so many alternatives, and we as World Fund can decide, are we going to invest in such a thing, making us even more dependent on fossil fuels? Or are we going to invest in something that is helping us to decarbonize with renewable energies, with sun, wind, waves, geothermal energy, you name it. So we always have a choice. And thanks also to you, we think that we are making many, hopefully, right choices to not only help to decarbonize our world, which is short-term extremely necessary, but we can also, while doing investment decisions, decide, is it a technology that can help us to build this regenerative world or not?
Beautifully said, and thank you so much for the description of the work that we do together, which I think, is certainly these evaluations, but it also, of course, goes beyond that. I mean, one of the things I really love about you also is your networking and that trying to build collaboration in this space. And that's another factor that I think I want to highlight with the World Fund and the work that you do, and what's so essential to help with that transition, right? If we have that sense of urgency, when we start to work together collaboratively, making those connections and doing so as for collective impact, I think that can actually be more effective, both in addressing the urgency as well as looking to future proofing and moving towards that regenerative future. And I think what you've pointed out here is the cascading benefits, right? We've talked about this for years now, Daniel. How do we find the right system of solutions to show not only the emissions reductions, this is the Duff factor, right? It's the emissions reductions. It's the, financial benefits if you are operating with a need for return on investment and profit. But more importantly, it's all those other benefits that help us achieve our sustainable development goals and then go beyond sustainability, as we point out. So I really appreciate the plug there. And but I have a sense that you are optimistic, right? Like your answer there was pretty optimistic about getting to that stage, right? Like finding those right technologies, getting the data and science there to back them up, and then, investing in that. Yeah. So do you feel hope? Do you feel optimism? That let's ground it in the financial sector in particular, because I think, I want to learn a little bit more about that. In the financial sector, what are you optimistic about for our collective future?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm very optimistic about the scalability of the solutions that I just described, only renewables, but there's so many more. I'm optimistic because I believe in the disruption potential of technologies, also because it has been shown so many times. And if you look at technology, some people are tech critical, and there are also many people who think like tech will solve it all. Not the case. But tech still is a huge part of the solution. And tech basically is the manifestation of the brilliance of our brains, of our creativity. So we can use that to create solutions that will decarbonize buildings, how we build, that will change the way we move forward. If it is a car that is on fossil fuel or on electricity, or is it even something we can even electrify aviation, and this will also happen faster than you expect. How do we create things, materials, new materials? I mean, and so I see those founders, I see those technologies, and then you can only be optimistic, because I know that the world in 10 years will already look much different than it looks today. And I know that we are going into the right way because, and that's the core of your question, in the financial industry, more and more investors are learning that those solutions are even those that generate more return than if you stay on the dirty side. So I am very optimistic that in 10 years already, we'll be very close to this regenerative world.
That's a bold statement. I want to unpack that. And I also want to unpack a little bit what you said about technology. And I think I want to start, I'll start with the technology, and we can go to that because so we don't lose track of it. But I think you're right on with technology. And there is this tension with, kind of the tech focused. And I think we often, I like how you said it's a manifestation of human creativity, because I think a lot of times when in modern perception of what we mean by technology are machines that use electricity, and to a certain extent that's the case. But we also think about technology in its most ancient manifestations, which it is it's an application of science in a real world application of science. And we forget often that there's indigenous people science and technology, right? And you talk to indigenous peoples, and they will talk about their science and their technology alongside their indigenous people's wisdom. And so I think it's really important to recognize that technology is not just this one, let's build this big machine that in a capitalist system, but it's encompassing of that manifestation of creativity and application of that creativity in the world. And I think that's really very well said. And I want to honor that, what you've just said there. But there is a tension, because I think it's not just that, it's how the technology is implemented in a capitalist system. And I think that's where the tension lies. I know there are extreme folks in the regenerative space who say no technology at all and just forget all tech. But I think by and large, most of us understand technology is needed. It's how it's applied. And I think that's really the concern in the systems we're operating in. And perhaps that then leads, of course, the unpacking of the second part is you're optimistic. I'm not so optimistic, to be honest, that the financial sector in 10 years is going to be able to make this shift. And I want to understand how what you see as those indicators of that. Because what I see is the vast majority of capital is still not anywhere close. regenerative finance is a niche within investing, is a niche within impact investing, which is a niche within overall investing. So how do we really look at financial institutions across asset classes to integrate these regenerative practices to move us forward faster?
Mm-hmm. So first of all, we need to define what is regenerative finance. Regenerative finance, of course, is something that creates this regenerative world. What is this regenerative world? World Fund have defined it. It's something that builds on renewable energies, that builds on circular economy, and that's builds on climate justice. So this is the three pillars that we always look at and hope to create with the technologies we invest in. Your last question, to be honest, is difficult to answer. I would try, also because I'm only an expert for the venture capital and maybe a bit PE, private equity field, but not all over finance. And in venture capital, I've seen, at least in Europe, a huge shift that while we invested 5 years ago, less than 10% into technologies that we call climate tech, now 5 years later, it's more than 30%. So more than around a third of the capital is now invested into climate tech, that also we at World Fund consider to be so. So I think also venture capital is investing in early companies. Those companies will be, hopefully, many of them corporates and among the leading industries and companies and corporates of the next decade. So we hope that this will kind of infect in a positive way the whole finance industry to turn into regenerative investing. But of course, also banks, insurances, there's also still a niche, but there's also something that is beginning. Then I think maybe we should also be clear in technologies, what is a regenerative technology? I just thought people who are listening and are not so much into VC and climate tech maybe now ask themselves, okay, Daniel just gave that question of basically renewables, but what else is renewable, is a regenerative technology? And I would say, to give you an example, I would include here something that is recycling batteries, for example. It's one investment we did. So a company in a very sustainable way that has developed the technologies that is recycling lithium, graphite, everything that a battery for EVs and for the electrification of transportation needs. So we don't have to mine all that material or to. So we have circularity in it. We have efficiency. We have reuse and reuse of resources while making everything that is fueled by electricity cheaper, because it's cheaper, of course, to use recycled materials if you do it right than to I don't know, burn fossil fuels. So for me, this is also creating a regenerative world, circularity, and a world based on renewable energies. Could give you more examples, but I just want to give this, I think, to make it more understandable.
I think that's spot on, and for those who are for those of the listeners who have been following Chat's Climate Quest for this time, well, we talk a lot about the different technologies, and so what I think you point out is really important, because a lot of folks think of regenerative technologies or solutions as being regenerative agriculture or ecosystem restoration efforts, and those are part of the picture. But when we created Drawdown as the system of solutions, the Drawdown solutions framework was explicitly, when we designed that with my team, it was explicitly to be the system of solutions that could solve climate and be the catalyst to create a regenerative future. And it's not so much about each one of those solutions and that long list of 90 plus solutions that we evaluated. It's how you apply those, how you implement them, and doing so as a system, not these one-off silver bullets and picking and choosing. It's how you find your way to implement all of them. That's really the key to making these solutions regenerative. And the reason I want to bring that up is because there are so many regenerative solutions. You can really think about whether it's energy generation or buildings or materials. You can look in the industry sector, agriculture, our land use and ocean ecosystems. All of these have solutions that are part of an economy of life. If they're done in the right way, with as a system and seeing the interconnection. So I think that's such an important point to drive home. But then I want to ask, venture capital, right? So this is your space of thought leadership, and you really are an advocate of this transformative power of venture capital. And I told you in the beginning, I'm not going to be easy on you just because you're a dear friend and colleague, but I want to know venture capital. I want you to explain this to me, because I see venture capital as almost the epitome of capitalist speculation, right? I see it as like you invest, and I asked almost the same question to our friend Nick de la Forge from Planet A when he was on the show, and it's investing in early stage companies. You hope for a unicorn or a gigacorn, as they call it now. You sell to a giant corporation, and then a small group of partners get richer and richer. Now, I know that's not the case. I wouldn't be an advisor to World Fund if that was, but that's my concept of venture capital, the epitome of capitalist speculation. So why do you think VC is the right instrument for a regenerative future?
It's a very, very good question that I asked myself before entering venture capital. And I thought the same, and still think in many ways like I did before and like you described it, because we have seen many not so beautiful things being funded just for short-term profit or even for the wrong values. And venture capital is not something where you can say it's good or bad. It depends on the people. It depends on like money. Is money a bad thing? No, it depends on what are you doing with it. And so I also thought it's easy to stay out of that field, but maybe it's better to enter and try to disrupt it from the inner, and to show all those venture capitalists that if you invest in regenerative technologies, that you can maybe even be more successful, including the financial aspect. So this is basically the challenge we are going in, and we believe that in a world of decarbonization, I always refer to decarbonization because it's comparably easy to measure decarbonization potential in megatons of CO2 or equivalent emissions. We believe in such a world of decarbonization in which we are living, startups developing such technologies of decarbonization will be among the most valuable companies of the next decade. And we see over the last 5 years, and especially the last 2 years, since some VC-backed bubbles burst, we can see the shift towards climate, because there was, at least in the last few years, no climate bubble to burst because the investments here were not so big to create such bubbles. So it's a good thing happening over the last few years in VC, but still, are we able to change venture capital? Will it? So the system is that, of course, you are incentivized to have exits, you're incentivized to go big, and the latter is absolutely, and the exit's no problem to me, because we need fast scaling solutions. We can't decarbonize tomorrow. We need to do it today, as soon as possible. So this, for our methodology, the Climate Performance Potential Assessment, CPP, always refers to the year 2040, which is quite far away, but investing in technologies that have the potential to save 100 megatons in that year, and we fund them. So it will, if they scale, it will come in the right time still to decarbonize far before 2050. When it could be already too late to avoid the worst consequences. And so I'm totally fine with investing into companies that scale fast and have the potential to become big and make those who own those companies rich. Why should you only be allowed to earn money with something that is creating bad? You should even earn more when you're doing good. But still, I'm aware, I was a journalist before. I have friends who are teachers. I have friends who are nurses. I have friends who are working as pedagogues. I have friends who earn so much less, although they are creating real value that is difficult to quantify in finances. So still, we are living in a world where I think there is some injustice. I don't think that someone who invests in 30 bad companies and in one that is really going through the roof and making really a huge change, does this person really deserves 1,000 times more income and wealth than one person that dedicates his or her life to being a teacher, a good teacher, for example. I don't think so. So I think we would also create a regenerative system if there would be more equality, more justice in my eyes.
I mean, absolutely. I think, justice, equity, and inclusion at the very heart of that system of solutions. And that's what when we think about how to implement solutions, I mean, that really has to be at the center stage of that, and justice, equity, and inclusion of our human species and all species of life on this planet. So I think that's really an important insight, is that, sometimes you have to work with the system you're operating in. You meet people where they're at, but I think what's key is not leaving them there. And this is sort of our tagline at Regen Intel, as you know so well. Let's meet people where they're at and not leave them there. And I think that's what I'm seeing in the World Fund and the work that you do, is how do we meet the impact investment space where they're at now, and create tools and methods to show, to model how to be, and then walk with it. Because you're also deeply enmeshed and embedded in creating coalitions of impact investors. So it's not just the World Fund. And I'm not an investor. I'm not in the, and that's not my line of work. But what I also understand about venture capitals, or what I think I understand, perhaps this is a misconception, is that you don't partner. You don't link arms in the investment, because it's all about who gets the best investment and finds the right startup and makes the most money. And this is something I think I want to highlight for the listeners, that you and the World Fund do remarkably well. And I've never seen it. How you link arms, and this is what I mentioned earlier, the networking and sharing, collaborating. And I want you to talk a little bit more about that, because I actually think that's sort of the seed that you're planting in this space to germinate and create more, it's like a mycelium network you're trying to create of investors. And I see that. I want you to talk a little bit more about it.
Yeah, we are doing it different in the climate tech VC space, because we understand that we are trying to solve the same problem. It's most of us are very much aware of the climate crisis. And Nick, you mentioned before from Planet A. So we had long chats, long talks, long discussions. And I clearly know that people working for his company and he himself, we have the same mission. It's different than other venture capitalists are doing it. Like, we are not trying to hide, the good technologies from one another, but we share much more. Also with other venture capitalists trying to solve this bigger problem, and we are creating events where we try to influence the general VCs, where we show the opportunities, where we connect with politicians, where you can clearly see we are advocating and coming together for a cause that is bigger than than we are.
I think that's one step, and I think that's also so important. And there's a reason, though, that I think World Fund and you all helped create the Global Solutions Alliance, right? And so for those of the listeners who don't know, the Global Solutions Alliance is our Regen Intel's nonprofit side, it's one of our nonprofit that we helped create with the World Fund and others. And the whole purpose of it is to create a public good for humanity, to create a data repositories and modeling and evaluate toolkits, frameworks, totally free, open source, a public good for perpetuity to help decision makers, right? And to be a coalition of partners from all different sectors. But, I remember early discussions, Danijel, and you were really keen to support this project because you saw, as I recall, the global solution and this concept of creating a free, open source public good as essential for the investment world, so that we could all be making those informed decisions and choices based on data, based on science that is constantly living and being changing and growing and evolving as new data and information come. And I think that's really the crux of being so collaborative. And I think it's rare to have a VC who wants to have an open source data repository and toolkit to help make those decisions. I think that's a really important point.
The same is with the CPP methodology. We have clearly shown how we assess it. We also share assessments. So we want other venture capitalists to use this methodology, this assessment, and they also start to use it. So we have created also a Venture Climate Alliance together with some fantastic American, European, and Asian VCs that are aligning on a methodology to quantify the impact. Because, and especially in climate performance potential means, which is mainly emission savings potential, we believe this is a financial KPI, right? And this is, again, the question, shall we go with the system or against the system? I think we will get faster to solutions if we try to change the system, use it, not go against it, and help other venture capitalists to use a metric that is quantifying impact, the climate performance potential, because they see it as a financial KPI, which increases their probability to invest into the right companies. I think that's a fair point, and so they start to care about the impact.
So, you talk about this, right? So you're talking about the World Fund CPP process, which I know very well, but perhaps you can talk a little bit to the listeners, some details about what the CPP, does, why it's so important for you in making investments, and then I think maybe lead to that, like how has that methodology and approach led to some examples of successes, some inspiring stories, successes of the World Fund's portfolio that you can share?
Yeah, so we have seen a lot of greenwashing on the market and have also always by LPs. It's the limited partners who invest into a fund like ours. They always ask, what is climate in fact? How do you differentiate climate from non-climate technologies and startups? And so before we even founded World Fund, we have defined and created the methodology to make sure to invest only in solutions that have, as I said before, significant emission savings potential and fit with the regenerative world that we envision, which we wrote about before founding World Fund, which we developed the methodology before funding World Fund. So this was necessary to have a foundation, to have a vision and a metric to make sure to invest into the right decarbonizing, I repeat that, decarbonizing technologies. And so it works. You mentioned Daniel Valenzuela before, who developed it on a basically top-down level. What you did with Project Drawdown, quantifying the emission savings potential of technologies. So we look up very much your database. We use your Global Solutions Alliance. And then we basically back that up with life cycle assessments, which is a bottom-up approach. And usually we come to similar results where we can quantify, specify a range of emission savings potential. And if this is above 100 megatons, only then we look at a technology. And thanks to your repository, for us, it's comparably easy as a fund that gets more than 200 deals, or close to 200. It's less than 200, but per month, which is really quite an amount, to filter out 3/3 of the technologies and applications, and really to make sure to focus and to use our resources only for those real, as we call it, climate technologies that have the CPP that we are looking for.
I think it's actually a really innovative approach to this, and I don't see so many investors taking such a rigorous approach and methodology prior to even starting the fund, first of all, but continually use this and continually have this back and forth with Regen Intel as we evaluate this. We have this back and forth where we provide you, say, well, here's what's missing. Maybe look here, maybe dive deeper into this. And so you're really attentive to the data. You're really attentive to the science behind these potential technologies and then what the kind of impact they can have. And I think that's actually the most transformative piece of the puzzle in my mind in the investment world, like how to really ground your decision making in its climate performance potential. But there's more than climate, right? And you and I have talked about this. I'm one of designing a sustainability performance potential, a regenerative performance potential at Regen Intel. And I want to ask you though, in your decision making, when you look at these potential investments and startups, you look at the carbon potential, carbon reduction potential, the climate impact. What about biodiversity? What about human health and well-being? Like, maybe talk a little bit about how these other co-benefits to many of these solutions come into play.
So biodiversity is, of course, a huge topic where we are looking at many solutions. And when you invest in biodiversity, basically automatically you have the CPP, because when you save biodiversity, when you invest in it, it kind of, as a byproduct, saves emissions, because it's restoring nature. It's whatever biodiversity solution you look at. I would say the problem here is that we still want to make sure to invest our capital as useful as possible. So of course, as venture capitalists, you have a few bets that you can make, but you really want to make sure to bet on the solution that can scale most, fastest, return most profit, which I think is a very fair thing and a very good thing. And this is also the duty we have to our LPs, and which automatically comes with best impact also for biodiversity. And so, so far, we have mainly looked at solutions that can help us to quantify biodiversity. So you can't, and this is disputable, you can't save or invest in something that you can't measure. Of course you can, but it's we want to create that foundation and look at solutions that help us quantify biodiversity. I by myself would say this is not a super cool answer, because I would love myself to hear this is the three solutions that are relevant for venture capitalists. This will scale. And I don't have that answer. And I would love to learn if someone has a better answer than I gave now. Very, very welcome to share.
I think you make an interesting point about the need to measure in the systems that we're operating. Like this is what we talk about. In the system we're operating, measurement is essential in order for you to make that kind of investment. I would challenge that that's maybe not the best model, because it's so geared towards a quantitative assessment of precisely how much biodiversity, and I'm not sure that's what we need in order to save our human and natural systems from calamities that we're on the cusp of. I mean, you've maybe seen these graphics where you see the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis coming. So I think we need to really transform our understanding of how we measure, and maybe it's not about how, maybe it's coming up new ways of measurement and understanding impact that can really push us forward.
Yes, totally agree. And it's something I talked today about with Danijel, whom you mentioned before. So what he is now looking more and more on is solutions that we can help scale without outside of the VC space. And of course, there's what you mentioned, biodiversity. We've also talked about indigenous technologies. We have talked about maybe also we need to change the way we think about ourselves. So what I mentioned before, understand that we are all one, because I'm pretty sure as soon as we understand that if I hurt you, I hurt myself. If we really feel the pain we do to others, even only indirectly, while buying a chocolate and for that chocolate, rainforests have been cut down and children have been worked as slaves. If you taste that, you won't eat it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just to do a little plug for Danijel Valenzuela for our listeners, Danijel is actually also a mentor for the Regen Intel Foundations course. So some of the folks who are taking our course have this opportunity to engage with Danijel, and I think that's also part of this. What you're bringing into this space is new ways of thinking, and that diligence, I have to say, is refreshing. And that's that authenticity and integrity that I think I mentioned earlier that drew me to connecting with you all. And then I think it's so important and maybe missing a little bit in the investment space. So I really applaud you for creating this vision at World Fund, understanding.
May I share something with you?
Yeah, please.
Which will maybe also make you even more optimistic. I see what an impact it has that we entered the venture capital space with a fund raising an amount of above 300 million as a first-time fund, which is unseen in Europe with this climate topic. So it was believed, Kamau and Yusa, you've been working in politics and journalism before, why you, with strong, of course, partners who have huge investment track record, but why should you in Europe as a first-time fund with such an impact topic raise more than any other purely finance-focused fund has ever raised in Europe as a first-time fund? We did it. And this I can see is inspiring other founders, is inspiring other investors. So we're keeping it up, and you can really see how younger people, founders who are in their 20s, we all have this will to support, to help. We are social beings, right? We are altruistic. I believe very much 99% of humankind, 99% of us is altruistic and wants to. We are social beings, right? And you can wake that up pretty easily by also being a role model. So I really want to stay humbled, but I'm also proud of what we have built and how young founders consciously decide to build technologies in the climate space, in the regenerative world space, instead of pursuing something what is purely profit-driven. It's easy to wake that good thing in you. It's easy. It's easy.
It's easy when you have models to look to, and you have mentors to help guide and stewards to help you on your journey. And I think that's so key too, is to, look around, look to those models and see the ones that resonate and help you awaken that to do that, make that change. And I want to end because we're definitely out of time here, but I ask my guests every guest the same question, and I want your insights here to close. Regen Intel and all the work that I do, we're deeply committed to this concept of creating a regenerative future and this vision that goes beyond sustainability. And I would like you to paint that picture for us from your vantage point. When you envision that regenerative future in 2030, 40, 50 or beyond, what does that look like? And what is your role and that of, well, let's just take, what's your role? What's Daniel's role in realizing that vision?
I think the most important part of such a world would be that we recognize what is really making us happy and a fulfilled person. And I think we will know that it's not so much material that we need, that it's mainly the people around us that we need, and that it's nature. And if we understand that, we'll live in a different, maybe also degrown world that is based on renewable energies, based on circularity, based on living together with nature. Nature is full of tech. Nature is tech, by the way. Nature is tech. I mean, we are mimicking, copying so much. Before we create something, we look, how did nature do with its experience and R&D over millions and even billions of years. So, and then my role, I mean, I'm living in the year 2024, right? Creating those technologies to be the base of such a world. And then, maybe then in the year 2040, 2050, the best thing I can do is maybe to be a role model and to show that even though I've become rich as a venture capitalist, I spent the money not on something what is, I don't know, a huge house, a huge boat or whatever, but spending the money into impact and to trying to create a better world, because this is fulfilling me more than a yacht. I hope this is me being a role model maybe then for others. And I hope very much that I will stick to this vision and to myself.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for that, painting that beautiful vision of regenerative future. And I know that you're going to be that role model. You're certainly a role model for me when I look to the investment space and I see the potential of transformation there. Your insights have, not only I think enlightened us about, how to provide like a tangible pathway to action with solutions, and your work at the World Fund really exemplifies the transformative impact, I'd say, of thoughtful, strategic, data-driven, but also inspired investing, and it can have on our planet. And thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey and your wisdom with us.
Thank you, Chad.
And thank you all for joining us today, including my 2 cats. I'm thrilled to welcome you on my climate quest.
This podcast is brought to you by Regen Intel, a public benefit advisory and education platform training the next generation of leadership for a better planet, and co-produced and distributed by our incredible partners, Better Worlds, Soar Studios, and Shikonomy. Special thanks to Michael Katijian, aka Inverse K, for the incredible intro number for Season 3 of this podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others. And to learn more about Regen Intel, check out our Foundations program at www.regenintel.earth/education. Applications are accepted all year round. See you next time on Chad's Climate Quest.